So I do want to go ahead and bring in our special guest. His name is Danny Haiphong. If you're not watching his channel, you're really missing out. He hosts the Danny Haiphong Geopolitics channel. Danny, welcome back.
Hey, Sabby. It's really good to be back.
Crazy times.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really necessary to have these conversations right now in these, as you say, crazy times.
Crazy times. Like for those who don't know, I texted Danny last night and I said, that motherfucker has bombed Iran. Like, it's insane what's happening right now. I want to show everybody the message here from Donald Trump. I shared this last night. This is an interesting part too. He said, we have completed our successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for attention on this matter. So he's saying now's the time for peace after he just bombed Iran there. And one of the things that I noted here is that Trump bombed Iran. MAGA, come get your dude. You voted against Nikki Haley and for Donald Trump, but you still got Nikki Haley. So, Danny, I want to pivot to you. What on earth? I want to get your thoughts about this.
Well, this was predictable in some ways because the United States, Donald Trump himself, but really the United States as a whole, whenever it comes to matters of foreign policy, word is not bond. It cannot be trusted. And so when Donald Trump said that he was going to, within a 2-week window, consider whether the U.S. was going to strike Iran or something else, it was quite clear that the United States was doing this to actually pivot toward a strike and really fool, not Iran, because Iran is saying that they weren't fooled, that they understood that this was coming. They were fully prepared. In fact, these nuclear sites had already been evacuated. Fordo in particular, there's satellite imagery showing that they had been evacuated days before, if not longer before these strikes occurred. So Iran wasn't the one who's fooled. But of course, with the United States and foreign policy, when it comes to the foreign policy establishment, their main hope is to actually fool the constituency, the people of the United States, so that they are lulled to sleep and accept the warmongering and then the consequences of it. But in terms of these strikes, it's quite interesting because on the one hand, there's a lot of talk right now about how effective were these strikes, what actually happened. The United States, from Pete Hegseth to Donald Trump to Sean Hannity to really the entirety of the foreign policy establishment on the Trump side, they are celebrating. They said that they got the job done. But over the course of these hours and into the full 24-hour plus since this occurred, what we are actually seeing is that the Western mainstream media itself, from CNN to the New York Times, they're actually walking back this claim that they have destroyed, the Trump administration has destroyed Iran's nuclear program. In fact, it's almost quite likely, if not entirely true, that Iran's nuclear enrichment program, its civilian nuclear enrichment program, people have to get this through their heads, that this is a civilian nuclear enrichment program. This is the United States bombing a sovereign country and bombing their nuclear materials, mind you, or trying to, that this is a flagrant violation of the UN Charter to the maximum. And it appears that this strike was actually far more public relations than it was impactful. Even now, CNN is saying that Iran was tipped off before, that the United States made a call through one of their various back channels that even Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said they have been keeping and that they have been responding when they see fit. So all of this is to say is that this was indeed a dangerous escalation, historic, as Axios called it when it first occurred. That is true. But on the other hand, it is quite clear that, as I've been saying in the days leading up to this, the United States foreign policy establishment is very afraid of the consequences. They've really boxed themselves in to what is now being exposed for much more of the world to see, which is that the United States is an empire, that it seeks hegemony at all costs, and that it sees Iran as a big threat to that hegemony, and it wants to commit regime change. Actually, Donald Trump, as we have come on this show, Sabby, as you've started your show, just posted on his Truth Social, if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be regime change? So this is now coming out of the horse's mouth what the true aim of this war on Iran really is all about. And now the question is, well, is the United States prepared to bear the costs of this? Because the costs have already been spiraling and cascading even before this strike began. The United States was the one that pushed, and it wasn't just Israel pushing itself. It was the United States and Israel working together to push toward what ended up being that surprise, what people are calling a Pearl Harbor attack, which I have a little bit of problems with because of the dynamics here. Really, what Israel did was they attempted to sink Iran internally through their many what they emphasize really when they do state-to-state operations, which is intelligence. They try to topple Iran through a shock and awe campaign inside of Iran, and it failed dramatically. And now Israel finds itself in a war of attrition with Iran, which it likely, if not entirely, will not win. And we're seeing how absolutely brutal Operation True Promise 3 is escalating on Israel. The costs on Israel are now piling up. So all of this is to say is now the question is, can the U.S. bear the costs of this? Because now the Western mainstream media is panicking. You have some on the U.S. Political aisle who say they oppose Trump, saying that they are actually really concerned about what could happen from here. But truthfully, this has been a bipartisan project. Donald Trump is an Iran war hawk. We have to start saying this because a lot of people believe that Donald Trump was not a hawk at all, that he was for peace and all of this. But the truth is that he has a long record. He was the one who tore up the the JPCOA nuclear deal during his first administration. He was the one who authorized the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. He is the one who reimposed sanctions after the tearing up of that deal. And ever since he became president of the United States for the second time, he, from the very beginning, was making intense threats. It all started with that just absolutely insulting and disrespectful and disgusting letter that he said he mailed to the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, saying that either you capitulate to us or there's going to be war. This is where it all started, at least in this administration. And now we see the United States under a hawkish regime toward Iran moving toward all-out war. And it's unclear that the United States' foreign policy establishment understands the consequences that could be born from this, nor is it clear whether the United States foreign policy establishment understands that this is truthfully a war they cannot win. Now, Western mainstream media saying that the United States has failed in much smaller wars of aggression that they have waged: Afghanistan, Iraq, even Syria, which, while the Syrian government fell last year, that doesn't mean that the military campaign that the United States attempted to overthrow Assad was successful in the short term. The United States simply cannot afford another long war if their ultimate goal is to essentially destroy all of the pillars of the multipolar world, not just Iran, but Russia and China. This is an outstretched empire that is now taking a dive into one of the most dangerous escalations and wars that that we might be witnessing in several generations. So that's where we are, I believe, and it's unclear where things are going to go. But Donald Trump and his administration has promised more aggression, and Iran is definitely prepared for that scenario, and we should be too.
Yes, and I do want to let everybody know a couple of things that happened today. It's interesting. JD Vance is saying one thing, Donald Trump is saying something else. JD Vance was recently interviewed earlier this morning, and he says we don't want regime change in Iran, which is the exact opposite of what Donald Trump is saying. But here's the real president of the United States, and that's this guy here, Benjamin Netanyahu. I want you guys to hear what he had to say after the U.S. struck Iran.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
That's the real president of the United States. Some people don't want to admit that, but the reality is it has been Israel that has been making a lot of the decisions here in the United States. One of the things I do want to show people about that Fordo facility here, they did say in Iran that it wasn't the type of damage that Trump is trying to claim it was. Listen to this.
تنها بخشی که در سایت هسته‌ای فورد آسیب دیده این تونل‌های ورودی و خروجی بودند و آسیبی به خود تأسیسات.
So that part's important, that it was the entry and the exit parts of the tunnels there, but the actual facility itself was not damaged, to Danny's point there, which also goes to show you that this was done to escalate things. I have no doubt about that. This was done to escalate, not to bring about peace. This is basically the U.S. government. And by the way, this is a direct attack on Iran from the United States, not Israel. We directly struck them. Iran had already warned us that if we were to get involved in this conflict between themselves and Israel, that they would target the U.S. military bases in that region. Danny.
Yeah. And, Donald Trump bypassed Congress, broke U.S. law. Donald Trump and his administration broke international law 3 ways from Sunday through this attack. And it's a real sign of weakness. You said Benjamin Netanyahu is the real president of the United States. What's so interesting about this is, in fact, the United States has all of the power in theory to dictate terms to Israel, because without U.S. support, Israel wouldn't be able to do all that it is doing right now, whether it's getting into this long war with Iran, whether it is the genocide in Gaza, whether it is what it has done to Lebanon, on and on and on, Syria occupation. None of that would be possible without the United States. However, because the United States is really a declining and moribund empire, because the United States is so desperate to keep its forward operating position and dominance and full spectrum dominance in West Asia, it so badly needs Israel to be quote unquote strong that the vassal knows what the deal really is. It's like the dog wagging the tail wagging the dog. It's the same animal. And so the vassal understands this, and Netanyahu and Israel has been using that leverage. It's the fact that it is needed so badly by the United States in this region to assert incredible amounts of pressure. And that, I believe, is the truth about the friendship, so-called, the alliance between Israel and the United States. It is really one of mutual benefit toward empire that, depending on the moment, and most of the time at this time, it is Israel calling a lot of the shots. is because the United States is so desperate to keep its position. And in a lot of ways, this attack on Iran was an act of desperation, because the United States was never going to get fully what it wanted from any kind of negotiations with Iran. Iran was never going to relinquish its sovereignty. It was never going to say, well, we can't enrich uranium. We can't have any kind of civilian nuclear program at all. That was absolutely ridiculous. And Iran was always going to demand that U.S. sanctions be lifted. All of this was known. Now, none of this is a secret, but all of this was an excuse. These talks, they were just an excuse to facilitate and build up toward a larger war with Iran. And now I want to emphasize here, because you brought up a good point. Iran also has promised that the retaliation for what the United States just did is coming and was always going to be coming. This is not a secret either. Remember, when Qasem Soleimani was killed in 2020, the winter of 2020, under Donald Trump's first administration, Iran did respond. Iran did hit U.S. military assets in Iraq, and it caused some injuries, no deaths to U.S. personnel. But nonetheless, it was a strike and it was a hit. This is a far more, even more egregious. While Qasem Soleimani was seen as a successor to the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, while Qasem Soleimani was a revered leader in the fight against ISIS and a real hero in Iran, still what the United States has done is flagrantly violate Iran's sovereignty, and did so on essentially nuclear grounds, which is incredibly dangerous and a huge precedent to go into a sovereign country and try to hit their civilian nuclear program, which, mind you, was empty already. And the United States knew this. The United States knew that Iran was taking their materials, their enriched materials, out of there, that they were going to evacuate. And now we know that the United States was communicating with Iran about this strike, and they wanted to keep it limited because the United States fears the consequences. But guess what? The consequences were always going to come, and now we are going to see what those are going to be. And of course, Iran has many options. Iran is not Syria. It's not Iraq. It is not a country that is likely going to be bombed into submission without incredible costs to the United States and the world economy itself. This is why we had the United States over this period just going back and forth about whether they would even do this at all, even though it was quite guaranteed that something was going to happen. And now we know that it was quite limited. But even just this limited attack, this limited attempt, this limited violation of sovereignty is still that. And Iran is ready to respond. And I argue that Operation True Promise 3, in the last 12 to 24 hours since these strikes, that has already sent a big message. Iran hasn't even gotten started yet. All of this bluster of Israel and the United States saying they've destroyed missile stockpiles, Iran is going to run out of missiles any day now. It doesn't look like that's the case at all. In fact, it doesn't even look like Iran has reached into really what could be considered their actual war-ready, most advanced missiles in their arsenal, in particular the hypersonic Fatah 2, which will not be stopped by any air defense system, whether it's Israeli, U.S. produced Arrow 3, anything in their Iron Dome, or whatever the United States will attempt to save Israel with. It's just not going to do anything. So this is kind of the bind that the United States finds itself in now. It has boxed itself into a corner, and either it really does step back and say, well, we can't do this anymore. We're going to have to take a pause in this war in Iran, or they're going to go all in, because there is no other option for the U.S. foreign policy establishment at this time. They have truly opened Pandora's box.
Yes, they have. And I do want to mention this. There are good things that are happening. Danny mentioned how Donald Trump did not get the approval of Congress. There are a number of people calling for Donald Trump's impeachment at this point in time. But I do want to let everybody know that Thomas Massey was on Face the Nation earlier this morning, And Thomas Massey is not happy about this at all. And this, again, is someone who is a member of the Republican Party. And he said that they were not briefed on any of this, that Congress was not briefed. They didn't know that that Donald Trump was going to do this. So there is a somewhat of a split that you're seeing right now from those who did support Donald Trump. I want to show you what Pete Hegseth said recently. Let's go ahead and get to this clip here. I think it's pretty damning what he says in this video.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America and Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites. And we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future. And we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this.
So one thing I want to add here, he is obviously selling people a bag of lies there. Danny and I are old enough to remember the Iraq War, and we remember the lies that were sold to us, to the American people at that point in time. And that's what Pete Hegseth is trying to do right now. He's trying to convince you that the U.S. military is so much more powerful, if Iran was to do this. But what he admits there is that it was intentionally limited because this is to provoke Iran. And the reality is Iran is huge. And Danny, I know you've talked about this before on your channel. A number of people we tried to warn people that if Israel was not held accountable, that things would escalate in the Middle East. And it went from Gaza and the West Bank to escalations in Lebanon and then escalations in Syria, which, by the way, just a reminder, there were some progressives and some pro-Palestine activists cheering on the escalation in Syria. Don't forget that. And we tried to warn people about that. And then ultimately that this would end up with a war with Iran, which is what we definitely did not want. And now we're here. But Pete Hegseth is basically just a used car salesman. And I would say at this point, Danny, I feel like Israel is basically a military base in the United States for a military base in the Middle East for the United States. I really do. And I feel like it's sold under this belief of it's a safe place for Judaism, even though it's a secular state. I feel like Israel is just another military base for the United States in the Middle East.
Yeah, and it's most important. And I always want to say, whenever the lords of war like Pete Hegseth talk, there's just so much there that could just be completely deconstructed as baseless lies. I mean, we just need to begin with the fact that this is WMD's repackaged again. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Everybody knows this. The IAEA, which is really an Israeli-U.S. cutout at this point, admits that. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, including Iran, including the United States. But it's constant repackaged weapons of mass destruction. So bad, so desperate is this repackaging that it's about the potential for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, which has already been proven to also be very spurious in argument and absolutely no justification for violations of international law. And also what gives the United States the right to this. The United States is a party to the Non-Proliferation treaty, but the United States is the biggest violator of that treaty. The United States just violated it on its face through this attack. The United States is constantly modernizing its nuclear arsenal, which it has used before in history. So it's the United States, because it's been the hegemon, it can operate within these so-called international frameworks that it chooses to try to forward its own aims. It's not an actor that can be trusted. It's truly, whenever it's participating in the international arena diplomatically, it's really just trying to wage war by other means, and that is what has happened here. So there's that. And so Pete Hegseth, yes, he exposed the fact that this was intentionally limited, and he says, oh, if we looked at what happened, if you looked at what happened, if you were with us in the Situation Room, you would have been awe-inspired. Well, all of the evidence now suggests that there's nothing awe-inspiring about what happened. This whole shock and awe campaign, actually, it was quite strange when it was reported. It seemed like there was a lot of confusion in the Western mainstream media and the White House about how to report this. There was Trump going on Truth Social saying that it happened. There was Axios leaking it to some degree. It was very, very, very controlled. And the information, even up till now, is very mum. The United States does not really want the truth of what happened in these strikes to really come out, which is why we're relying on satellite imagery. We're relying on Iranian sources. We're relying on videos being taken and shot by people who are driving past these nuclear facilities, at a far distance, to show us that perhaps these attacks were really actually just bombings of a couple of entrances of empty nuclear sites, which is actually likely what happened. So all of this is to say is that the United States is always attempting to, its foreign policy establishment, the elites, the oligarchs that control it. They are always looking to thump their chests, to look powerful. Donald Trump's administration, its whole motto, peace through strength, is all about just absolutely destroying this word peace, taking it and just bludgeoning it, and then using it as a weapon of war. And here we are seeing the actual limitations of the US's power. And this is I think the thing that people have to understand and realize is that there's kind of a duality here. On the one hand, the United States is actually a declining empire. Its military does not have the capabilities, and likely will not have the capabilities, to conduct regime change against Iran without immense costs globally and domestically to the United States. This is 100% guaranteed. It's already happening. And it's only going to get worse if the United States pursues an even more aggressive campaign against Iran. And there's no guarantee. Actually, there's a far more likelihood that whatever happens to Iran is going to backfire really badly on the United States. The United States can't send troops to Iran. They can't. This is not a physical possibility. They're not going to airdrop troops into Iran with a population of 98 million with a large standing army. It's just not going to happen. That's just sending U.S. troops to their graves. People were horrified. You remember this, Sabby? Horrified at the relatively small numbers during the Afghanistan and Iraq period. These are relatively small numbers, and this is not to take away from people's lives and the cost to those families in the United States of those deaths. But we all know about the lopsided casualty numbers and those who died between Iraqis and U.S. troops. What would happen in an attempt to wage a full campaign on Iran would just blow. It would be a shock to the United States as a whole. It would create a huge identity crisis, because not only would you have more U.S. troops coming back in body bags, but you would have multiple likely U.S. fighter jets shot down, multiple potentially U.S. Destroyers and naval aircraft carriers damaged or sunk to the bottom of the sea. This would be the imagery with Iran's capability and arsenal that is very difficult to imagine the U.S. bearing the cost, not to mention what happens with a huge energy producer like Iran. Despite the sanctions, still plays a very critical role in the oil and gas markets. The disruptions that this conflict would have, which I know we're going to talk about in a second, with that scenario, with the world economy, with what happens to the markets as a whole and the oil markets in particular. So all that is to say is that then the United States, with its rabid warmongering foreign policy elite, they have a decision to make. Either they pull back, as I said before, or they go even further. And the only possibility further, when there's no option for conventional military victory, the only other option is to drop a nuclear weapon and to try to eliminate the Iranian government as a whole by violently and cruelly attacking the Iranian people, and through nuclear means, which would really be the end of the United States itself. The amount of unrest globally and domestically to such a scenario would be indescribable. So not a lot of good options here for the United States, truthfully, when we think from the perspective of the warmongers. And it's this hubris and this confidence that's really, truthfully, a ruse. It's dangerous. I think we should all be, we should not have any reservation about how dangerous the decline of the empire can be and truthfully is. But at the same time, with those limited options, what this means is that we are really at an inflection point in global politics and development history, and the history of, I guess we could say, modern warfare. But truthfully, in the history of the empire, we are at a moment that's accelerating quite drastically, which is the end game for it. There's only one battle that the U.S. Military albatross and the imperial forces that control it see, and that is the rising powers to the east and what that means for the global south. Iran is a key cog for that, for this multipolar movement, China, of course, and Russia. And then you have, of course, the rise of Africa and Latin America and Asia happening in conjunction with all of this. And this is the main theater of war. And unless the United States can succeed in toppling these rising powers, the United States will eventually be just another country, just a heavily armed, violent, incredibly exploitative, and truthfully, one of the least popular in the world as time goes on. But nonetheless, that's the reality it faces, and that's what the ruling elite, the oligarchy, those who control the U.S. foreign policy establishment, that's what they're really trying to figure out right now. And that's why it looks so chaotic, and ultimately, that's why it's so dangerous.
Yeah, and I want to add, people have to remember Iran was part of the resistance. Don't forget that. Iran, Ansar Allah, like, they were part of the resistance. They support the Palestinian cause. So always keep that in mind. Same thing with Hezbollah, like, they support the Palestinian cause here. I want to show you guys a little bit of what Donald Trump said after the strike.
Here he is.
Here he comes. Here comes the president.
We've seen this walk so many times, moments of history, moments of controversy, and today a seismic moment in terms of the Middle East.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
So that's a lie.
Yep, that's a lie. I mean, and it was in the now, and this is not just us saying this, Sabby. It's the mainstream media saying, "Oh, it's unclear." And you have even JD Vance saying, "Oh, maybe not." But it's anyone who knows anything has seen the reports, has seen what Iran has been saying, and also understands just how deeply this nuclear enrichment material was embedded into the ground, and then forecasting and telegraphing over and over, well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Well, Iran evacuated the materials, and so what's destroyed? The program will continue, even if there might be some setbacks in some areas, but nonetheless, it's not obliterated. And later in that address to the nation by Donald Trump, he literally says, "Oh, well, now it's time for peace, but if there's no peace, then we're going to hit you harder." So this is the message that the United States is sending Iran, which is, well, we bombed you to try to get you to bend the knee and come groveling to us at a negotiating table. And if you don't grovel and crawl to us on your knees at the negotiating table, then we're going to bomb you even harder. So this is the image of the United States now. It is this callous bully that can't seem to get its way, but continues to try to hit the hammer on the nail anyway, even though the nail isn't moving. And this is Iran. Iran is that nail. Iran isn't going to move. Iran is strong enough. And, a lot of people were doubting Iran. A lot of people doubted Iran for many, 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 many weeks and months after, especially when Israel struck Iran, I believe it was October of last year, and Operation True Promise 3 didn't happen. A lot of people were questioning its leadership. A lot of people were questioning its ability to survive this multifaceted campaign by the U.S. and Israel to destroy the region centered and located really in Gaza and Palestine. That's where the outgrowth of this, at least this latest firestorm in the Middle East began. So now it's quite clear that Iran is very serious, has been planning hard, that there's been a lot of meticulous and strategic moves made about how its capabilities are both preserved and utilized in a long war. And Iran is not the one panicking here. Iran is not the one saying, well, oh no, what are we going to do about a war of attrition? They're being very open that they're ready for 6 months. They're ready for a year. They're sending different messages, but all of it says that they're going to go the distance with this because sovereignty is non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable, as it should be for truly independent countries. If your sovereignty is negotiable, then you're not an independent country. You're a country ready to become subordinate to the United States and the larger Western unipolar order. Iran isn't going to play that game because that game destroys Iran. That game ensures that not only the Iranian people, but really people all over the world are sent into even more misery and destruction than what we already see taking place in the region and globally. So this is truthfully, while it is a moment fraught with great dangers, I also think that this is a moment that could change a lot in the course of history, because if there was any inevitability about the current global dynamic, the geopolitical situation, the world situation as a whole, if there's any inevitability, it was that the United States was going to at some point do the unthinkable with one or many of the major rising powers of the global south and the multipolar world. It just was unclear how far, how deep it could do it. We see in Ukraine, proxy war, failure. There's no real room for maneuvering there. It's a war of attrition that's not going to go the United States' way. China, that's a long way off. Actually, forget about China now with this huge reinvestment in war in West Asia. And so the hawks for Iran have won out in the U.S. foreign policy establishment, and this is where they see their primary focus being at this time. But this was an inevitability, and it was really just a matter of when, not a matter of if the United States was going to conduct a regime change operation in full or in part. It was a matter of when.
And I'll get to that because Iran's response, this is one of their responses. Every American citizen or military is now a target. Iran warns after US bombs nuclear sites, which they stated this prior to the attack. They said if the US were to intervene, that you would now be a target. So the United States can't say that they did not know about that. At the same time, I think it's really important to mention this as well. A lot of people have been asking, would things have been different if Kamala would have won? Well, here's proof that it would not have been, which I didn't believe that anyway. This attack that happened in Iran, it is now reported that the U.S. and Israel practiced the attack in a military drill about a year ago. That was under the Biden-Harris administration. So it's important that people understand that this was already decided. It was decided, I would probably say it was planned before even a year ago, but they were practicing this under the Biden and Harris administration. So even if Kamala Harris would have won, this still would have happened. What people have to fully grasp is that both of these parties belong to the military industrial complex and they belong to Wall Street and corporations. They don't belong to the people. Israel has a hold on U.S. Politics. Netanyahu is on record saying this before, that they own pretty much almost everybody, except for a few like Thomas Massie, in Congress. It was already decided. And then this part here, something else I want to share with you as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, Kamala Harris said Iran is the greatest adversary of the U.S. They were all in on it. Just like they tried to lie to you and say they were working tirelessly for a ceasefire, that was revealed earlier this year. That was a lie. They were never working for a ceasefire. Both parties bought into the military industrial complex. And honestly, like I said before, Israel is basically an American military base. Don't forget that Joe Biden said if Israel didn't exist, they would create one. And that was years ago. So this is why I've noticed this, Danny, and you can tell me if you've seen this as well. I'm noticing that a lot of the anti-war conservative people under the Biden-Harris administration were very vocal about being anti-war, now are trying to make excuses to go to war with Iran, and vice versa. A lot of the liberals under the Biden-Harris administration were making excuses for Biden and Kamala supporting, the ongoing weapons going to Israel, committing the genocide in Gaza. Now that this is happening under Donald Trump, they're saying no to the war. So what you basically have are two groups of people that are sucked into two parties, and they just go along with that, whatever the party does. A lot of these people don't have any real principles. If it's their guy that's in the office, that's what they tend to follow or make excuses for it. But people have to understand this was already set to be. Now, Donald Trump had the opportunity, because he ran on, peace and all that stuff. He had the opportunity to do things differently. But we also tried to warn people that if you went back to his 2016 presidency, he wasn't anti-war then either. So I don't get it, Danny. I don't understand why people fell for the okie doke.
In the United States, unfortunately, we have a situation where expectations are quite low. This is a huge theme. We could say the decline of empire, the spiraling out of control of neoliberal, political economy, the race to the bottom, as we can call it, that people are experiencing. And what ends up happening is in the United States, under these conditions where there is a low level of political development, a low level of collective organization, that leads to not only low expectations, but a high level of isolation. Those two things put together are very dangerous, because what ends up happening is that politics are driven by fear and desperation. And even if there are many millions and millions of people in the United States who truly want peace, who truly want a better life, they can be pushed into holding their nose for one of the two corporate parties around the issue of war and peace, simply based on rhetoric. And I think it's really important to understand that the United States has been built upon. It is an empire that is literally built upon lies. What are lies? Lies are rhetoric. Lies are backed up then by destructive foreign policy and domestic policy and whatnot, but it's backed up by material reality that's imposed on ordinary people. But nonetheless, the lies are the rhetoric. And the only time a United States political operative, a politician, if we want to call them that, the only time they tell the truth is when they are backed into a corner. This is what you see in the Western mainstream media, which is why, I read it. I still do try to investigate through it, because you can actually get a lot of kernels of truth, and usually it's based on potential or actual crises that the U.S. empire faces. The only time they'll ever tell the truth is when they see a huge problem for themselves that they need to communicate to their base. That's it. But everything else is going to be a lie, especially political campaigning that's dependent upon legitimizing an institution as something it's not, a democracy that represents people, over, to conceal what it really is, an oligarchy that is controlled by monopolies, banks, military contractors, Wall Street, etc. So that's the reality that we face. And the war now against Iran is a huge example of what happens when that reality slaps us in the face. That reality is not slapping us in the face hard, because we literally have Donald Trump, someone who has said, how many times has he said, the Middle East, the wars were a disaster. They were a disaster. Trillions of dollars spent, people dying, bad for the economy, etc., etc. He even said that Barack Obama was going to be the one to drag the United States into war with Iran. Now, of course, the Obama administration was certainly no peacenik when it came to Iran, despite the JPCOA. The Obama administration was very keen on not only further militarizing West Asia, but also violating the terms of the JPCOA to such a large degree that it almost rendered it irrelevant, leading to Donald Trump. This is the game. You know this, Sabby. Leading to Donald Trump being able to so easily rip it up. So all that is to say is that Donald Trump has said words over and over and over again about peace this, peace that, but now we're in year 5 of Donald Trump as U.S. president. And of course, elections last longer than that. So we've been dealing with Trump as a politician for over 5 years. And a huge theme of this is that West Asia is the calculation as being the weakest link in this war on the multipolar world. And now the United States foreign policy establishment, alongside its most important forward operating military base in the region, Israel, is attempting to knock over that domino that they see as the easiest to knock over. I think it's a huge miscalculation. It's not going to be a short war if the United States chooses the path of full-scale aggression on Iran, whether it is deciding to do this on its own or whether events simply push it further into that. Sometimes when you step into a shallow pond, you end up finding yourself sinking to the bottom of a very, 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 very deep ocean. that can happen when you don't understand the geography of the situation. And that is what I believe the United States as empire, that the situation it finds itself in. Some people that I speak with, friends of mine, some are less optimistic than I am. Some believe that Russia, China, Iran, they're weaker than maybe some make them out to be. Some people believe that Russia and China and Iran are in a really good position at the moment. But I think we have to look at this a little more clearly, that all of these things can be true in different points and in different settings and in different areas of politics, economics, and geopolitics at any given time. And right now, what it seems that the United States' desperation is really taking a hold of it. And it could lead the United States into a disastrous long war with Iran that it simply not only can't control, but it won't win. There will be no victory coming out of this. This could destroy whatever is left of the U.S.'s so-called position in the world in a very rapid fashion.
And I think we got the poll, Eric. Thanks. Because I forgot to announce the poll last time. So I just want to make sure I get to the poll results. Thank you very much. All right. Do you believe Iran will respond to the U.S.? 3,598 votes. 72% said yes. 7% said no. 5% said I doubted. And 15% said I'm not sure. Thank you. All right. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.